By Thursday morning, Karen knew she had a problem. The Hendersons hadn't removed their pool, and worse, they'd installed a privacy screen that technically made it compliant with subsection 12.34 of the HOA bylaws. Karen had spent 2 hours with her magnifying glass and legal pad, searching for any loophole, any violation, any reason to maintain her authority. She found her answer in the fine print of the pool installation regulations. The screen was beige, not the HOA-approved desert sand color that was exactly 0.7 shades lighter. "Got you," she whispered, already typing up a new violation notice. The doorbell rang before she could print it. Karen opened the door to find not just Mike Henderson, but also Janet Morrison from 3 houses down, Bob Chen from the corner lot, and Maria Santos from across the street. Behind them, she could see more neighbors gathering on her lawn like some kind of suburban mob. "We need to talk," Janet said, her voice deadly calm. Janet was the neighborhood's unofficial social coordinator, the one who organized the block parties that Karen always found reasons to shut down. "I'm very busy with HOA business," Karen replied, trying to close the door, but Bob's construction boot was already wedged in the frame. "Yeah, about that," Bob said, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd actually built half the houses in the neighborhood. "We've been talking, and we think you've lost your damn mind." Karen's face flushed. "I'm protecting our property values, our standards. You should be thanking me." "For what? Making kids cry?" Maria stepped forward, her nurse's uniform still bearing the previous night's shift at the hospital. "My daughter Sophia is friends with Emma Henderson. You know what she asked me yesterday? She asked if you were going to take away our swing set next." "That depends," Karen said before she could stop herself. "Is it regulation height?" The crowd erupted in angry voices. Karen found herself backing into her foyer as neighbors she'd barely spoken to in years suddenly had very strong opinions about her leadership. "Enough," Karen shouted over the noise. "I am the duly elected president of this HOA, and I will not be bullied by a mob." "Elected?" Janet laughed bitterly. "You ran unopposed because nobody else wanted to deal with your crazy." "Well, that's about to change," Bob announced, pulling out his phone. "We're calling an emergency meeting for Saturday. We're voting on new leadership." Karen's blood ran cold. "You can't do that. The bylaws clearly state that any 5 homeowners can call for an emergency meeting with 72 hours notice." Mike interrupted, waving a copy of the HOA charter that Karen had never expected anyone to actually read. "And we've got 12 signatures already." As the crowd dispersed, Karen slammed the door and leaned against it, her heart pounding. She could hear them talking on her lawn, their voices carrying through the walls of her pristine home. "She's been getting worse every year," someone was saying. "Remember when she tried to ban Christmas lights because they were too festive? Or when she measured my mailbox with a ruler because she thought it was too tall?" Karen slumped against the door, sliding down to sit on her marble floor. She'd spent 4 years building her reputation, establishing order, making Willowbrook Estates the most regulation-compliant neighborhood in the county. And now they wanted to throw it all away for a pool. Her phone buzzed with a text from her sister Linda. "Saw the neighborhood drama on Facebook. Maybe it's time to let someone else take over." Karen stared at the message, her hands shaking. Even Linda, who lived 3 states away, had heard about this. The humiliation was spreading beyond the neighborhood borders. She looked around her office, at the certificates of recognition from the county HOA board, at the photo of her shaking hands with the mayor after Willowbrook Estates won Most Improved Neighborhood 3 years running. This was her life's work, her legacy. Karen stood up, smoothing her clothes and adjusting her glasses. If they wanted a fight, she'd give them one. She still had 2 days before the meeting, and she knew these bylaws better than anyone. Time to remind the neighborhood exactly why they needed her. Karen Whitmore stood in her perfectly manicured front yard at 6:47 a.m., her rhinestone-studded reading glasses perched on the tip of her nose as she squinted at the Hendersons' backyard. The blue glow of their new above-ground pool sparkled mockingly through the slats of their fence, and Karen's perfectly contoured eyebrows furrowed into a V shape that would have made her Botox technician weep. Absolutely not, she muttered, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had single-handedly gotten 3 different ice cream trucks banned from Willowbrook Estates. She marched back into her house, her orthopedic sneakers squeaking against the marble foyer as she made a beeline for her home office, a shrine to HOA enforcement complete with color-coded filing cabinets and a wall-mounted magnifying glass for reading fine print. 20 minutes later, Karen emerged with a violation notice that would make a tax auditor proud. She'd cross-referenced 17 different HOA bylaws, highlighted the relevant sections in 3 different colors, and attached photos she'd taken with her telephoto lens. The pool was exactly 3.2 inches too close to the property line, lacked proper screening, and, most damning of all, the Hendersons had failed to submit the required pool installation application form 47B. This is what happens when people think the rules don't apply to them, Karen announced to her reflection in the hallway mirror, practicing her stern HOA president voice. She'd been president for 4 years running, unopposed, mainly because everyone else had lives to live. The doorbell rang at exactly 8:15 a.m. Karen opened it to find Mike Henderson standing on her doorstep, looking like he'd thrown on the first clothes he could find. Behind him, she could see his 8-year-old daughter Emma and 10-year-old son Jake peering around the corner of their yard, still in their pajamas. "Karen, about this notice," Mike began, holding up the official HOA letterhead. "It's Mrs. Whitmore during official HOA business," Karen interrupted, her chin tilted at the precise angle she'd practiced in her mirror. "And I assume you're here to discuss your multiple violations." Mike's face went through several shades of red. "Look, the kids have been asking for a pool for 3 years. We saved up, we bought the thing. And now you're telling us we can't use it because of, what? 3 inches? Rules are rules, Mr. Henderson. If I let you slide, what's next? Pink flamingos? Garden gnomes? Trampolines?" Karen shuddered visibly at the thought. "This is a respectable neighborhood. It's a pool, Karen, not a nuclear reactor. Mrs. Whitmore, and your pool is creating a safety hazard, an eyesore, and a potential liability issue for the entire community." Karen adjusted her glasses, preparing to deliver her knockout punch. "You have 72 hours to remove it or face daily fines of $50. Mike's mouth fell open. $50 a day? Are you insane? "I'm thorough," Karen replied, already closing the door. "Good day, Mr. Henderson." But as she watched through her peephole, Karen saw something that made her stomach tighten. The Henderson children had come running over, and she could see Emma's face crumple as Mike explained the situation. The little girl's shoulders shook as she cried into her father's shirt. Karen stepped back from the door, her hand trembling slightly on the deadbolt. For just a moment, she remembered being 8 years old herself, begging her parents for a pool they couldn't afford. She remembered the disappointment, the way her mother's face had looked when she'd had to say no. Then she remembered the property values, the standards, the chaos that would ensue if she showed weakness. Karen straightened her shoulders and walked back to her office. She had calls to make, emails to send, and a neighborhood to protect. Even if they didn't understand it yet, she was doing this for their own good. Outside, she could hear the splash of water as the Henderson kids jumped into their pool one last time. Karen spent Friday morning doing what she did best, finding violations. By noon, she'd issued 14 citations ranging from Bob Chen's mailbox being half an inch too high to the Patel's rose bushes, extending 2.3 inches beyond the approved setback line. She hand-delivered each violation notice, her clipboard clutched like a shield against the increasingly hostile stares of her neighbors. The Morrison house was her final stop. Janet answered the door in paint-splattered overalls, clearly in the middle of touching up her shutters. "Really, Karen?" Janet held up the violation notice. "You're citing me for having the wrong shade of white. The approved color is antique white, not off-white," Karen replied, consulting her color chart. "There's a significant difference. It's the same damn paint I've used for 8 years. Paint fades, standards don't." Karen turned to leave, but Janet's voice stopped her. "You know what this is really about, don't you?" Janet stepped onto her porch, her voice carrying across the street. "This isn't about rules or property values. This is about control. You can't stand that people are happy without your permission. Karen whirled around. I am trying to protect this neighborhood. From what? Children laughing. Families enjoying their own backyards. Janet's voice rose. When's the last time you actually talked to any of us? When's the last time you came to a barbecue or a block party, or even just said hello without handing out a violation? I don't have time for social activities. I have responsibilities. You have problems, Janet shot back. And tomorrow, we're going to fix them. Karen retreated to her house, her hands shaking as she locked the door. Through her window, she could see neighbors gathering in the Henderson backyard, their voices drifting across the fence. She crept to her second-floor bathroom window and peered through the blinds. The Henderson pool was surrounded by families. Kids were splashing and laughing while parents sat in lawn chairs, drinking beer and actually talking to each other. It looked like a community. Karen's phone rang. The caller ID showed her mother's number. Karen, honey, I just got off the phone with Linda. She's worried about you. I'm fine, Mom. Just dealing with some neighborhood politics. She said you're fighting with everyone over a swimming pool. Karen felt her chest tighten. It's not about the pool. It's about maintaining standards, keeping the neighborhood respectable. Sweetheart, do you remember when you were little and you wanted a pool so badly? You made us drive to the community center every single day one summer just so you could swim. That's different, Karen whispered. Is it? You were so happy in that water. When did you decide that other people's happiness was your enemy? After her mother hung up, Karen sat in her kitchen, staring at her reflection in the chrome surface of her refrigerator. When had her face become so pinched? When had her eyes gotten so cold? She thought about the Henderson children, about Emma's tears, about the way the neighborhood had come together against her. She thought about the photo on her mantle from her college graduation, where she was smiling and surrounded by friends who had slowly disappeared from her life as she'd become more focused on rules and regulations. The doorbell rang. Karen opened it to find a pizza delivery guy holding 3 large boxes. I didn't order pizza, she said. It's paid for, the young man replied. The card says, hope you'll join us tomorrow. Your neighbors. Karen looked across the street. The Henderson backyard was still full of people, but now they were looking at her house. Janet Morrison raised her hand in a small wave. Bob Chen nodded. Even the kids had stopped splashing and were watching her. For a moment, Karen felt something crack inside her chest. She almost stepped outside, almost walked across the street to join them. But then she saw the pool, the violation of everything she'd worked to build, and the moment passed. Tell them thanks, but I'm not hungry, she said, closing the door. But as she watched through her window, Karen saw the pizza delivery guy cross the street and join the group. Someone handed him a beer. Someone else introduced him to their kids. And Karen realized that in 4 years as HOA president, she'd never once been invited to stay. Tomorrow would decide everything. Either she'd restore order to Willowbrook Estates, or she'd lose the only thing that had given her life meaning. Karen walked to her office and began preparing for the fight of her life. Saturday evening arrived with the kind of perfect weather that made Karen's violations seem petty. The emergency HOA meeting was held in the Henderson backyard, partly because it was the only space large enough for the 37 neighbors who showed up, but mostly because it felt like poetic justice. Karen arrived at exactly 7:00 p.m., carrying a briefcase that contained 4 years of meticulous records, precedents, and legal documentation. She'd spent the entire day preparing her defense, crafting arguments that would remind everyone exactly why they needed structure and leadership. Let's get this over with, she announced, setting up her folding chair apart from the semicircle of neighbors. I assume you've all come to your senses. The crowd exchanged glances. Janet Morrison stood up, holding a clipboard that looked suspiciously official. Karen, we've been talking, and we want to give you a chance to step down gracefully. You can keep your position, but we need some changes to how things are run around here. Karen's laugh was sharp and bitter. Changes? I spent 4 years turning this neighborhood into something respectable. Our property values have increased by 18%. Our compliance rating with the county is perfect. We've won awards. And we've lost our community. Bob Chen called out from the back. When's the last time anyone had a block party? When's the last time kids could play in the street without worrying about getting a citation? Children should play in designated areas, Karen replied automatically. And block parties create noise violations and parking issues. Listen to yourself, Maria Santos said, her voice sad rather than angry. You're talking about children like they're problems to be solved. Karen opened her briefcase, pulling out her violation records. I have documentation of every single infraction in this neighborhood. Without proper enforcement, we'd have chaos. We'd have what we had tonight. Mike Henderson interrupted, gesturing around his backyard. People talking to each other, kids playing together, neighbors actually being neighborly. That's not sustainable, Karen argued, but her voice lacked its usual conviction. Without rules, without structure, without joy. Emma Henderson's small voice cut through the adult conversation. The 8-year-old had been sitting quietly on the pool steps, but now she stood up, water dripping from her swimsuit. Why would you want us to be happy? The question hung in the air like smoke. Karen stared at the little girl, remembering her own childhood, her own dreams of summer days by the pool. She thought about her mother's words, about the photo on her mantle, about the last time she'd actually felt happy instead of just correct. Karen's voice cracked. I was trying to protect you, all of you, to keep things proper. From what? Emma asked, her child's logic cutting through years of Karen's carefully constructed justifications. Karen looked around the backyard at 37 faces, some angry, some sad, but all watching her with something that might have been hope. She thought about the pizza they'd sent, the invitation she'd rejected, the community she'd spent 4 years dismantling in the name of improvement. I don't know, she whispered, and it was the first completely honest thing she'd said in months. The silence stretched until Janet Morrison cleared her throat. Karen, we're not trying to destroy everything you've built. We just want to live here, not just comply here. Karen closed her briefcase with a soft click. What do you want from me? We want you to stay, Mike Henderson said, surprising everyone including himself. You're good at the administrative stuff, the paperwork, the county requirements. We just want you to remember that rules should serve people, not the other way around. And the pool? Karen asked, her voice small. The pool stays, Bob Chen said firmly. But maybe we could add you to the swim schedule. Karen looked at Emma Henderson, still standing by the pool, still dripping, still watching her with those honest 8-year-old eyes. I don't have a swimsuit. We'll get you one, Emma said solemnly. Do you like purple? I think you'd look good in purple. For the first time in 4 years, Karen Whitmore laughed. It wasn't a bitter laugh or a superior laugh or a laugh designed to make a point. It was the sound of something long frozen finally beginning to thaw. I think I'd like that, she said, and meant it. But as the meeting broke up and neighbors began to drift back to their houses, Karen noticed something that made her stomach tighten. The Patel family was hanging back, whispering intensely with Janet Morrison. They kept glancing at Karen, then looking away quickly. Something was happening. Something she wasn't being told about. As Karen walked home, she couldn't shake the feeling that the pool had been just the beginning. The real question was, what would they ask her to bend the rules for next? And perhaps more importantly, what would she do when they asked?